Hey, it's Alex, and in this video we're going to be talking about the 2019 15-inch MacBook Pro. It's actually the computer I have behind me right now running this lovely wallpaper for you. So this is actually my work laptop that my company gave me, and I use it every single day, and I realized, why don't I just review it, do a video on it, and so that's what we're going to talk about today. So this laptop's about 2 years old, and at the time it came out, it was pretty top of the line. It's still quite impressive on paper today. If you look at the processor, it's a 2.3 gigahertz i9. It's got 16 gigs of DDR4 RAM. It's got a Radeon Pro 560X with 4 gigabytes of dedicated memory. And it's also got a 500 gigabyte SSD drive. So on paper, this thing is pretty spec'd out and nothing to scoff at. But I should preface this review by saying, because it's my work computer, a lot of the settings are locked down. I'm a user, an end user, so I can't get in to change a whole bunch of things to really dial into this computer and change any notable settings. So I kind of just have to use it as it is. And I think that's good because it kind of gives me the point of reference of an average user. Somebody that's not going to go in and care about too many settings too much. They just want to open it up, use it, and so that's what we're going to talk about. So let's start with the hardware. First and foremost, that 15-inch size is great. I've owned one other 15-inch MacBook Pro in the past, and I gotta say that the larger screen is really nice. It's nice when you're working on it, you just feel like you have more real estate. That trackpad is so much larger to be able to use. The keyboard is the same size, doesn't really matter, but that screen is just great. But there's a flip side to that. So if you have to carry it around back and forth, I actually have to carry it in and out of the office all the time. It's a much bigger and much heavier computer than a 13-inch model would be. So that is the trade-off. Bigger screen, nicer to sit there and work off of, but it is heavier and bulkier to carry around with you all the time. And speaking of the keyboard, this model unfortunately does have the really bad butterfly keys that Apple introduced. Fortunately, my model here, I have not experienced any kind of key stickiness, but the dust really does get problematic if it gets, around the keys. I try to wipe it and clean it as much as I can because I know what a pain and a bother that can be when the keys do begin to stick. And not to mention, they are much more shallow than a different kind of a keyboard, or even the modern Magic keyboards that Apple has coming out. It's a little bit more painful to type on, not as much of a great key travel, so it's just kind of like tapping your fingers on a table versus tapping your fingers on a softer surface. So keyboard is what it is, but if it never sticks for you, which mine has not, knock on wood, it works just fine. And of course it has the touch bar, being the larger 15-inch version and pretty much top of the line. It has the touch bar with Touch ID, which I'm indifferent about, to be honest. So that's really it. Aside from the specs that were in the inside that we talked about earlier, this thing is a MacBook. I mean, it's good quality, it's good hardware. It runs the software just fine, runs it beautifully. And so the hardware inside, the processor, the storage, the memory, that's really what makes up the computer. And that's kind of what I want to talk about and my experience with using it. Granted, it's only 2 years old. Let's see how it's held up here in 2021, being used every single day. So I use this machine a lot. Every day, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, all day, it's on. My uses consist of emailing, video calling, Photoshop, Illustrator, occasional video editing, a lot of web surfing, Excel spreadsheets, Microsoft Word documents, everything, basically every kind of run-of-the-mill creative and or business suite app. I usually have many running at once. And it does a fairly good job. Honestly, if you're looking at this computer just by itself, not compared to anything else, it's a great computer. And especially now, you can probably find one way cheaper than they used to be here 2 years later. It's a great bargain if you still want an Intel-based MacBook with an i9 processor. It's not too bad. Battery life is still holding out pretty well. For a computer that's plugged in every day, all day, and I rarely pull it off on battery power, it'll last me quite a few hours of doing, intensive work with the screen brightness all the way up. It's still pretty good and quite impressive, especially for the size of the screen that it is. The battery life is still great. And that's really all I have to say about this computer. It's only 2 years old. It's still running great. It's running fine. 2 years ago, it was pretty much the top of the line, and it still runs very well even to this day. So I have to give a little bit of a plug to the M1 MacBook. Because I've been using it for so long, I've just gotten so used to that machine. And for anybody that uses the M1, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's snappy, it's quick, it's quiet, never gets hot. It's like you take the internals of your iPad Pro, you plug it into your MacBook, and it's just amazing. You're up and running. You never have to deal with fan noise again. You never have to deal with lag. I mean, in most cases, but it's just really good. So comparing this to that is not fair. I get that, but it does hold its own against the M1. So if you can deal with the crummier, shallower keyboard and you can deal with a hotter computer with some fan noise, this does just as well as the M1 in my opinion, which is saying a lot for both this computer and the M1. So who should buy this computer? Should you buy this computer? If you're just an average everyday user and you don't really need a whole lot of power, then absolutely not. This is not the computer for you. It wasn't 2 years ago and it's still not now. Go for something a little lower end like a MacBook Air or something like that. But if you need the raw power for video editing, this is a decent option. Maybe you don't want to jump on the M1 bandwagon just yet, and I get that. They're still working on application development to run on that processor, and that's fine. You know, in my opinion, this is about the best you're going to get in the Intel world. Like I say, if you still want to hang on to that Intel-based MacBook and you need something new for video editing, photo editing, this is a really good option, and I would highly look into it, highly recommend it if you're in the market for something used and want to buy something used. And maybe you're somebody that just wants that larger 15-inch screen, doesn't want to wait for the M1. It's a decent option, I'm not gonna lie, it's a pretty good computer. But just my personal preference, I would wait for the M1 15-inch or the M1X or the M2, whatever they're calling it. Apple is working on a larger version, the 14-inch, the 16-inch of the M series processor that we should hopefully see later this fall, later this year, if not next year sometime. But that's just me, I would wait on that. But no, this computer, it's great. It runs everything I need it to. It still keeps kicking every day, all day, and it handles everything I throw at it. So I honestly can't complain. It's a great bargain of a computer. And if you pick one up, let me know. I'd love to hear how your experience is. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.